Reduced to a symbol of disaster and monstrosity, her legacy was twisted beyond recognition. Huang summoned the heavenly maiden, known as Ba. Upon her arrival, the rain ceased instantly, the tide of battle turned, and Chiyu was slain. Having slain both Chiyu and Kuafu, Dragon Yinglong could no longer ascend to the heavens. He settled in southern lands, which explains why the south sees abundant rainfall. Though these two distinct entities were never connected in primeval lore, later generations unified their terminology simply because both were associated with Drought. The secret heaven-born Nuba was forcibly rewritten with the ghost ridicule as they cursed Nuba. Nuba's eternal exile and suffering were reframed as a voluntary noble sacrifice for her father. Huang Di, portrayed as a selfless, magnanimous sage king who ended chaos and secured peace at the cost of his own king. Civilizations feast on the sacrifice of their protectors, yet refuses to bear the pain those sacrifices leave behind. Those in power seize victory and transcendence. Those who give everything are trapped on earth or eternal shackles. Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Today we are going to talk about Nuba, the heavenly maiden misunderstood for millennia. In our previous video on Huang Di, we briefly touched upon a pivotal figure, Nuba, a celestial maiden. She single-handedly turned the tide in a war that seemed doomed to failure. Without her, the early foundations of Huaxia civilization might have been rewritten entirely. Yet her fate remains deeply tragic. Instead of honor, a triumphant return, or eternal remembrance, this civil of an entire race faced exile, isolation, fear, and millennia of demonization. Reduced to a symbol of disaster and monstrosity, her legacy was twisted beyond recognition. How did this happen? What sealed her cruel fate? Was she truly a bringer of calamity or a victim of deliberate historical manipulation rooted solely in China's most ancient texts, Shanhaijing, classic of mountains and seas, and Shi, records of the grand historian? We unravel the obscure tragic truths of these forgotten ancient goddesses. Across global mythologies, defining conflicts often forge the core spirit of civilizations. In Norse mythology, Ragnarok, the final battle between gods, giants, and monsters, embodies destruction and rebirth, shaping the ethos of Western Europe. In ancient Chinese mythologies, the pivotal conflict is the Battle of Zhuolu, the alliance led by Huang Di against Chiyu's militant forces. As recorded in Shanhaijing, Dahuang classic of mountains and seas, classic of the great wilderness north. 蚩尤作兵伐黄帝，黄帝乃令应龙攻之冀州蚩尤。应龙蓄水，蚩尤请风伯雨时，纵大风雨。蚩尤 raised troops to attack Huang Di. Huang Di dispatched Dragon Yinglong to confront him in the wilderness of Jizhou. Capable of gathering and controlling waters, Dragon Yinglong was soon outmatched when Chiyu summoned the Windlord and the Rainmaster to unleash catastrophic storms and deluges. Faced with such overwhelming elemental might, one critical question arose: what force could quell an all-consuming storm and flood? The answer lay in Nuba. The original text of Shanhaijing, classic of mountains and seas, continues. 黄帝乃下天女曰拔，以指遂杀蚩尤。黄帝 summoned the heavenly maiden, known as Ba. Upon her arrival, the rain ceased instantly, the tide of battle turned, and Chiyu was slain. To grasp Nuba's profound tragedy, we need only compare her fate with that of Yinglong. Both were indispensable saviors who secured victory and safeguarded early Huaxia civilization. Shanhaijing, Dahuang classic of mountains and seas, classic of the great wilderness notes. 应龙以杀蚩尤，诱杀夸父，乃去南方处之，故南方多雨。Having slain both 蚩尤 and 夸父, Dragon Yinglong could no longer ascend to the heavens. He settled in southern lands, which explains why the south sees abundant rainfall. As supplemented by 山海经, 大荒东经, classic of mountains and seas, classic of the great wilderness east. 应龙处南极，杀蚩尤与夸父，不得复上。Dragon Yinglong's divine essence was strained by his wartime feats, stripped of his right to return to the celestial realm. He was exiled to the mortal south as a local land deity. 女婊 endured an identical yet far crueler destiny. Also from 山海经, 大荒北经, classic of mountains and seas, classic of the great wilderness north. 拔不得复上，所居不语，疏君言之地，后置之赤水之北。女婊 was barred from heaven forever. Drought blighted every land she set foot upon. Lord Shujun, the human leader in charge of farmland and drought affairs, pleaded her case before Huang, and she was eventually bashed north of the river 赤水, the remote far northwest wilderness. The heavenly maiden, who quelled deadly storms and sealed victory, lost her celestial status forever. Her strange, unstable divine power left her with an inescapable curse. Parched lands and devastating drought followed her wherever she wandered. Filled as a harbinger of famine, she was shunned and driven away by mortal folk for generations. The two meritorious deities shared two tragic fates. First, neither could return to heaven to turn the tide of an unwinnable war. They wielded forbidden divine power at the cost of their godhood. Early ancient myths held no rewards for heroes, only the cold, pragmatic drive for civilization's survival. Second, both faded from mainstream collective memory over time. Yet their differences would label 女婊's unparalleled suffering. Dragon Yinglong remained revered as a noble war deity, though later folklore softened his original winged dragon form into a generic, auspicious dragon motif. His possessive legacy endured, fading only into quiet obscurity. 女婊's story, by contrast, was deliberately distorted. Mortals erased her acts of salvation and exaggerated her connection to Drought, branding her Han Ba, the primordial fiend of drought and ruin. The heavenly heroine who saved humanity was systematically demonized, stigmatized, and condemned as an evil omen for all time. Though 女婊 and Han Ba share one identical character, Ba, their origins and divine essences are entirely separate. A divide born of deliberate textual tempering and mythic reconstruction in later years. The original ancient term for this heavenly maiden was written with the female radical, Ba. This character exclusively denoted noble celestial goddesses carrying connotations of purity, sanctity, and divine grace, with no ties to calamity or evil omens whatsoever. By contrast, the later infamous figure of Han Ba uses the ghost radical character Ba. Rooted in the ghost taxical category, this written form was inherently linked to demons, plagues, and misfortune, revealed solely for the drought fiend that blighted lands, scorched plains, and brought widespread ruin to all living things. Though these two distinct entities were never connected in primeval lore, later generations unified their terminology simply because both were associated with drought. The secret heaven-born 女婊 was forcibly rewritten with the ghost radical as the cursed 女婊. This subtle character substitution amounted to calculated divine stigmatization. A heroic celestial maiden who descended to save mortals and turned the tide of war was branded a calamity spirit. Once revealed as a meritorious heavenly deity, she was remade into an ill-omened monster, despised and rejected by humanity for all time. In the original narrative of Shanghai Jing, classic of mountains and seas, Yu Ba served as a heavenly maiden under the supreme deity, dispatched to the mortal realm to aid in battle. The phrase Huang Di Yu Ba, Huangdi's Yu Ba, merely identified her as a goddess allied with Huangdi's affection. It never implied a blood bond of father and daughter. Early cosmologies maintained a clear divide between heaven and mortal realms. Huangdi was only a mortal ruler and a tribal sovereign, belonging to a system entirely independent from the supreme celestial emperor who reigned over the heavens. Yet beginning with Dongjing, the Eastern Jin dynasty, scholar Guopu's commentaries literati purposefully rewrote this foundational law. They redefined the heavenly maiden Yu Ba as Huangdi's biological daughter, creating an insurmountable logical contradiction. If she dwelt among the celestial beings as his flesh and blood child, Huangdi would have to be elevated to the status of supreme celestial ruler. This deliberate revision served two core purposes. First, it endlessly deified Huangdi, elevating a mortal ancestral leader to celestial rank, and cementing his unassailable legitimacy as the primal ancestor of Huaxia civilization. Second, it sanitized the suffering's image through the tragedy of familial sacrifice. Yu Ba's eternal exile and suffering were reframed as a voluntary noble sacrifice for her father. Huangdi, portrayed as a selfless, magnanimous sage king who ended chaos and secured peace at the cost of his own king, saw his mortal authority glorified beyond question. Beneath these surface alterations lay an even deeper agenda: the subjugation of the feminine through a patriarchal lens. In unaltered primordialness, Yu Ba stood as an independent, authentic celestial deity. She wielded divine power in her own right, possessed an autonomous divine identity, and remained unshackled by mortal royal authority, a fully self-sufficient female divine being. Once reimagined as Huangdi's daughter, however, her entire meaning and worth became subordinate to patriarchal order. Her sacred mission, her sacrifice, and her endless suffering were no longer framed as a heavenly duty to preserve mortal civilization. Instead, they were recast as an ethical paragon, a daughter who honors her father, above all, obeys his will, and sacrifices herself for clan and sovereign. A powerful, self-governing goddess was reduced to a tragic female figure, dependent on paternal authority, burdened with unearned guilt, and condemned to silent suffering. Through this reshaped myth, generations were taught to accept a rigid social doctrine. Women must yield to hierarchy, rely on patriarchal structures, and embrace self-abnegation as a sacred virtue for the good of family and the collective. By twisting Yu Ba's divine identity and rewriting her fate, later authorities gradually confined the role of women across society, neutralizing female independence, suppressing individual will, and redefining endurance, compliance, and self-sacrifice for the patriarchy as women's inherent destiny and highest mortal virtue. Dragon Yinglong was condemned to silent oblivion, Yu Ba to eternal infamy. This raises a haunting question. Huangdi commanded the war, while Dragon Yinglong and celestial Yu Ba obeyed his will, sacrificing their divine essence to end chaos. They bore irreversible, lifelong suffering for humanity's survival. Meanwhile, Huangdi retained his rule, prospered, and ascended to heaven in glory. Must the scars and consequences of war always fall upon those who fight, while rulers claim all victory and honor? Additionally, we must also question the origins of this narrative. Did the ancient worldview of Shanhaijing, classical mountains and seas, inherently demand divine servitude to mortal kings? Or was this the framework rewritten by later dynasties to legitimize imperial rule? Shanhaijing, classic of mountains and seas, preserves the raw, unfiltered mythology of an era where humans and gods coexisted. The alliance between demigod tribal leaders and celestial deities was an authentic ancient tradition, not a later fabrication. Even so, this chronologically lays bare an early core value of ancient Chinese civilization. The survival of order always outweighs individual sacrifices. Collective stability took absolute precedence, and all catastrophic fallout from war and fractured divine power was forced upon those on the front lines. Under this ancient rule, those who labored bore the wounds, while those in power reaped the glory. Confucian scholars and feudal rulers deepened this distortion in the centuries that followed. They deified imperial legitimacy, downplayed Dragon Yinlong's tragedy, and amplified Nü Ba's destructive reputation to vilify her permanently. Do all civilizations abandon their civils in this manner? The answer remains unclear, yet in ancient Chinese mythology this harsh truth is undeniable. Civilizations feast on the sacrifice of their protectors, yet refuses to bear the pain those sacrifices leave behind. Those in power seize victory and transcendence. Those who give everything are trapped on earth or eternal shackles. Gentle, usable divine forces are worshipped and glorified. Deities stand by suffering, and collateral harm are exiled, defamed, and cast aside for eternity. Piecing together ancient texts, we uncover a logically coherent, historically grounded, and deeply tragic truth. Nü Ba was a benevolent, steadfast celestial goddess. To rescue civilization, she burned away her divine power to halt world-ending storms. Her victory came at an irreversible cost: eternal exile from heaven and irreparably corrupted abilities. Branded a threat to mortal survival, she was banished to barren wastelands. She never wrought evil, never harmed mortals out of malice, and was never a monster. She was a tragic hero who sacrificed all for civilization, only to be forgotten, twisted, and condemned by history. Tragic civils cast aside by the world they save probably appall across global mythologies, but among them, Nü Ba stands as the quietest, most sorrowful, and most grievously misunderstood heroine in ancient Chinese lore. Does your culture hold such tragic, uncelebrated heroes? Share your thoughts in comments.